So with that being said, I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us as we commemorate the events of September 11, 2001. This year, we're also going to honor and remember those who sacrificed themselves for us, defending the ideals we cherish both before and after that fateful morning on the field of battle. And please join me in welcoming Sally Ney, Commander of American Legion Post 130. Sally?
I'd like to welcome everyone to the ceremony today on behalf of the Merrill L. Simmons American Legion Post 130. We're going to be starting the service this afternoon, with the Pledge of Allegiance by Afghanistan and Iraq veteran Matthew Ney.
Would everyone please remove your hats, uncover? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Cover. Detachment, attention, present arms.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
2. At ease.
And now we'll have an invocation by the post chaplain, Marge Kavanaugh. Uncover.
Lord, we ask your blessing on all assembled here for this remembrance service. Keep us, O Lord, grateful as a nation to those who through their efforts and sacrifices enable us to enjoy the blessing of this great land. Keep all who protect us from harm's way. We make this prayer in thy holy name. Amen. At this time, I would like to mention that Chief Alan Roy, who is always with us, is not with us tonight because his father is gravely ill. And I ask you to keep him and his family in your prayers. Thank you. Cover.
That's the way it is. Good days and bad days, up days, down days, sad days, happy days, but never a boring day on this job. You do what God has called you to do. You show up. You put one foot in front of another. You get on the rig and you go out and you do the job, which is a mystery and a surprise. You have no idea when you get on that rig, no matter how big the call, no matter how small. You have no idea what God is calling you to, but he needs you. He needs me. He needs all of us. These were the words of Father Michael Judge to the firefighters of Engine 73, Ladder 42 in the Bronx on September 10, 2011. Little did they know then just how big the call they would soon be responding to would be, nor did they know just how much they would be needed. The next day, Father Judge would become known as victim number 1, the first identified victim of the attacks on the World Trade Center. Father Judge had gone to the towers after hearing of the attack and was killed when struck by debris from the collapse of the South Tower. he would not be alone in his sacrifice. 343 firefighters and paramedics, 72 police officers, they would all give their lives that day. On that morning, as with every morning, members of the police department, the fire department, ambulance services, and all first responders did what they always do. They prepared to meet the challenges of the day, just as thousands of first responders did and are doing today as they deal with the devastation wrought by Hurricanes Harvey and Irma, or the wildfires burning in Montana, Washington, and Oregon. It is fitting that we stop and remember the sacrifices of that morning. It's important also that we remember the commitment of each police officer, firefighter, paramedic, and all first responders, too many of whom give their lives in service to their communities. And now please join me in welcoming Town Council President Barbara Barry. Barbara?
It seems hard to believe that today marks 16 years since the horrific attacks of 9/11, 2001. Most of us probably remember where we were at the time of the attacks and the shock that we felt that this could be happening here. It is events such as this that reinforce how precious life is and how we should take nothing for granted. The attacks of 9/11 killed 2,977 people, people like you and I, who were just going about their daily lives, people that expected to go home to their families at the end of the day. The attacks of 9/11 also brought people together. It is in times of crisis that we come together, putting our differences aside. I vividly remember when I think back to that day, the days after, and the sea of American flags. Everywhere you went, people were flying the American flag. The flags are also, which I think is something that I'll never forget, is on everyone's vehicles. People had the attachments of the flags on their vehicles. And I honestly wish, as I think back to the events of that time, that as the things happen, like Paul just said, Harvey, and all the other, Boston Marathon, all the different things, we unfortunately as a nation, we come together for a short period of time and then everything goes back to the way it is. Today we take the time to reflect on the events of 9/11, to remember those who were killed and the families that lost a loved one. We also take the time today to thank our first responders and military. These men and women put their lives on the line each and every day in order to ensure our safety. When we are running away from danger, they are running towards it. 9/11 is a national day of service and remembrance. On this day, and I hope one day, every day, we are asked to stop fostering hateful thoughts and instead do at least one good deed in honor of the victims and the first responders. I challenge you today to keep this in mind and attempt to find opportunities in the coming months to step forward and make a difference in honor of and in memory of those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you.
Thank you, President Barry. Our next speaker today is State Representative Todd Smola. Todd?
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here with all of you this evening. Thank you for coming out on this 9/11 recognition ceremony. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say how wonderful it is to see our good friend Marge Kavanaugh back here in action. Marge, thanks for everything that you do for our community. Thank you. It's very fitting, I think, that we are here today, given the fact of what's happening in southern United States between Texas and Florida, and the citizens of this country, that they're experiencing such terrible devastation. And much like what happened 16 years ago when we saw the very best of this country, once again, our emergency service personnel and citizens of communities are coming together and rallying to help their neighbors. And I'd just like to ask all of you if we could just take a brief moment of silence for everything that they're going through right now. Thank you. As a nation, we are not defined by the moments where we get knocked down. we are defined by how we pick ourselves up. And when I think about 9/11, and I think most of us can agree with this, we don't think about a terrorist attack that happened 16 years ago. We think about the acts of heroism that actually really defined that day. It wasn't about planes crashing into buildings, it wasn't about these horrific acts, but it was more so about the men and women that sprang into action in a moment's notice in order to help their neighbors and their brothers and their sisters. And we have so many stories of those acts of heroism. But that is the very essence of what defines 9/11. As we come together and we memorialize that sacrifice, but we take pride and we thank them for that which they have done and that which they continue to do every single day. Now, when we think about 9/11, we think about that particular day, but in our communities all across this country, our firefighters, our EMTs, our police officers, all of our emergency service personnel are ready to do the very same thing every single day of our lives in order to serve the very best of what this country is all about. And that's the kind of thing that we need to keep in mind as we come together on this type of a ceremony 16 years later. I look at some of the young folks here today, some folks that weren't even born 16 years ago, and it's hard to imagine that that much time has gone by. But we continue to come back as a community every single year because we know the importance of what 9/11 means to us. We know the importance of thanking and remembering those individuals that do everything they possibly can to protect the very best of what this nation stands for. And so I hope that we will depart today, after today, and not just think about 9/11 on this one particular day, but every single day of our lives, to know that at the very roots of the town of Palmer, the roots of our state and the roots of our nation are within good people that want to watch out for the neighbors, that want to help, that want to do good. And remember that we are defined by those moments where we come together, where when you think that things are at the worst point that they could possibly be, that we come together and we rise to the occasion. And that's the very essence of what happened on 9/11. So I want you to keep those individuals in your thoughts and in your prayers. And remember that sacrifice that our emergency service personnel do every single day of our lives in our community and in our country. They are the true heroes of the United States of America. Thank you.
Our final speaker this evening is State Senator Ann Goby. Senator Goby.
Thank you to Mary, Paul, and to the Legion for joining together and giving us all an opportunity to come out tonight to remember the memory of those whose lives were stolen from them. And it is good to see Marge, but you can't keep a good woman down, Marge. I had no doubt that you would be here. As has always already been said, we know that we saw the worst of humanity on that day, but in the days and weeks and months and years that have followed, we continue to see the best of humanity. And we see it in front of us. We see it with our veterans. We see it with the active military. And we see it with our fire, our police, our emergency responders, who are always, always there for us. On this day, a lot of you know that I lost a good friend of mine on September 11th. And I always have a good cry for myself, and don't worry, I already had it, so I'm not going to do it now. But after I think about Brian and I shed my tears, I smile. Because Brian, like so many of the other victims, they were like us. They had family, they had friends, they had people that loved them. They liked to have fun, they liked to smile, they liked to laugh, they enjoyed life. And so when we come together tonight and we have an opportunity to remember them, and yes, it's good to shed a tear or two, but shed a smile too. Shed a smile for them. Keep a smile going, because that's important as well. As it's important when we hear music. That's okay too, because that's all part of life. It's all part of life. And that's what we should do. George Bernard Shaw had said that in life, that he wanted his life to be like a burning torch. And he didn't want it to go out at the end of his life. He wanted that torch to still burn bright and hand it off to the next generation so they could keep it going. When we come together tonight, when we come to ceremonies like this, when we light those candles, we light them for those who have gone before us. We're lighting it for the next generation to keep things alive. So thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Senator Goby. Now please welcome American Legion Post Commander Sally Ney for the dedication of bricks for the Walk of Honor.
Tonight we're also going to be dedicating the newest bricks that are in the Walk of Honor. Some have been placed over by the star. The remainder are over by the flagpole, which is where we will be placing the bricks at this point. Those being dedicated: Kenneth S. Clark, Army Private, Korea; Charles Johnson, County Post Commander, United States Air Force, 1933 to 2000. Solomon Stephen, U.S. Air Force, Korea, 1950 to 1954. Robert O. Johnson, Korea, XPOW, 1950, Commander, 1953. John Jake P. Comer, U.S. Air Force, Quincy, Korea. Lana E. McDonald, Sergeant, U.S. Air Force, 74 to 78, Vietnam era veteran. John M. Weigel, Sr., U.S. Army, Private First Class, World War II. John J. Palka, Jr., U.S. Navy, E6, 1979 to 1986. John M. Weigel, Jr., U.S. Navy, E3, 1962 to 1966. Ralph E. Johnson, Corporal, Army, Korea, World War II. Richard T. Santucci, Staff Sergeant, Army, World War II. Anthony Saucer, Vietnam War, 1964 to 1968. Donald S. Holcomb, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Marine Corps, 2005 to 2014. Sergeant Leon Chick Woldika, Army, 1962 to 1966. Dave Surratt, U.S. Army Infantry, Vietnam, 69 to 70. Pete Surratt, U.S. Marine Corps, Korean War vet. Ronald R. Jutras, U.S. Army, Korea. In memory of James F. Sullivan, U.S. Air Force. The Department of Massachusetts, American Legion. Ranger Chris Barrows, 3B2/75 Ranger. Edgar J. Hamill, U.S. Navy, 1919 to 1923. Craig S. Hamill, U.S. Navy, 1977 to 1983. Matthew J. Hamill, U.S. Air Force, 2001 to 2008. Lisa M. Hamill, Army National Guard, 2003 to 2011. Richard Simmons, U.S. Army, 1952 to 1954. Raymond G. Levine, U.S. Army, 1966 to 1968. Ronald Garvin, U.S. Navy, 1940 to 2004. Specialist Nicholas Athos, Afghanistan, Army, miss you. Ernest A. Clark, U.S. Navy, PTRV 2C, World War II, 1943 to 1945. Paul V. O'Malley, Specialist E4, U.S. Army, National Guard, 1984 to 1990. Vincent O. O'Malley, PFC, U.S. Army, 1951 to 1953. Richard McDonald, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Air Force, 1951 to 1964. James Terravenier, FT, U.S. Navy, 79 to 85, USS Lawrence, DDG. Dewey Johnson, Staff Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, killed in action, Iran, April 24th, 1980. John Harvey, Sergeant, U.S. Marine Corps, killed in action, Iran, April 24th, 1980. And George Holmes, Corporal, U.S. Marine Corps, killed in action, Iran, April 24th, 1980. now like to place a rose for each of those killed in action from the western part of Massachusetts since 9/11. Killed in action are Sergeant First Class Daniel Henry Pethery, Cheshire, killed in action, 2001. Sergeant Gregory Belanger, Deerfield, killed in action, 2003. Sergeant Glenn Richard Allison, Pittsfield, killed in action, 2004. PFC Marcus J. Johnson, Springfield, killed in action, 2004. Chief Warrant Officer 2, Stephen Michael Wells, North Egremont, killed in action, 2004. First Lieutenant Travis John Fuller, Granville, killed in action, 2005. Captain John William Maloney, Chicopee, killed in action, 2005. Specialist David J. Babineau, Springfield, killed in action, 2006. Corporal Jeremy Paul Buford, Middlefield, killed in action, 2007. PFC Kenneth J. Iwazowski, Belchertown, killed in action, 2007. Staff Sergeant Daniel Allen Newsom, Chicopee, killed in action, 2007. Specialist Ari D. Brown, Weeks, Layden, killed in action, 2007. First Sergeant Devin A. DuPont, Chicopee, killed in action, 2009. Sergeant Joshua David DeForgy, Ludlow, killed in action, 2010. PFC Michael R. DeMarcico II, North Adams, killed in action, 2012. Specialist Mitchell K. Duckling, Dalton, killed in action, 2013. Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Sullivan, Springfield, killed in action, 2015. And the final rose is presented in memory of all those servicemen and women who have returned from active duty and died as a consequence of their visible and invisible injuries sustained while in service to the United States of America.
Thank you, Commander Ney. We'll now begin the candle lighting portion of our ceremony, but I would ask everyone, as you light your candle, to please reflect upon the name of the person and say it out loud as you light your candle. That person was someone's mother, father, sister or brother, son or daughter. Most of those names will never be well known, but each of those people who died that day were important to someone and probably to many people. Their lives were important, and we should remember that as we reflect on the events of that day. Thank you.
Anthony Mark Ventura.
Tool. While the events of September 11th were horrific, we must not dwell on the attacks themselves. Doing so benefits only those who wish to harm us. Instead, we remember our response, a response that makes our greatness so evident. We remember the sacrifices of heroes like Father Michael Judge and hundreds of others who ran into those burning buildings with no thought of their own safety. We remember also the hundreds and thousands of first responders, many from Palmer, Western Mass, and around the nation, who volunteered to help in the days and weeks after the attacks. But we must also remember and acknowledge their continued commitment to the safety of their communities. As we remember and honor their sacrifice, we should remember and learn from their example and share that example with our children. In remembering, we connect with one another, we strengthen our community. We must never forget. before we conclude our event, I just wanted to thank everybody who participated, especially the Parma High School Band and the chorus. They've been here and been consistent participants year after year, and we welcome their participation. They always make this a memorable event. I also wanted to thank Town Council President Barbara Barry, State Representative Todd Smola, Representative Ann Goby, or Senator Ann Goby, I'm sorry. You just got demoted. But. And I also wanted to thank the first responders in our community, members of our police department, the various fire departments from Palmer, Three Rivers, and Bondsville. We often take them for granted, but day in and day out, it's those folks that keep our community safe. And we really need to focus on that. When you hear a siren going by, that person in that vehicle doesn't know what they're going into and what the outcome of that event may be, and regardless, they're not hesitating to go to that call. I also wanted to thank Town Manager Charlie Blanchard, who's in attendance tonight, as well as Town Councilors Carl Williams, Matt Lemieux, Lorinda Baker, and Bob Lavoie. Each year they've been steady participants in our event, and they continue to enhance the community and make us a stronger community. And last but not least, I want to thank Councilor Mary Saltzman. This seems to be an almost seamless event from the outside, but I've gotten all the phone calls over the years from Mary. I know how much time and effort she puts into this event, how dedicated she is to ensuring that we do truly never forget the events of that day. This event would not come off in any given year without her efforts, and I wanted to thank her especially for her continued effort and her dedication to this cause.
American Legion Post 130 would like to thank everyone for coming today and to let you know that the next dedication for the walkway will be in June of 2018. We will need the brick request by the end of April in order to get the bricks completed and in. It will probably be the first Tuesday of June. I'm not exactly sure, but since it's the end of World War I, we will actually be doing a program regarding World War I in 2018. So, Sergeant at Arms, would you please hold the 21-gun salute? Thank you. That concludes the service. Thank you. Combine together well.